We're coming to you from the Dubai Cloud and Data Center Convention 2024, and joining me now is Stephen Beard, Global Head of Data Centers at Knight Frank. Stephen, welcome to W.Media.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start by talking about the Middle East market and why it is attracting or should attract international interest as well. Why should global data center operators consider setting base here?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think historically there's always been a global perception that international data center operators that aren't Emirati or Saudi based, they can't access the market. In essence, there has been a monopolization led by the incumbent telecommunication companies. I think in part that was probably true maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but I can categorically tell you now that isn't the case. The UAE, Saudi, Qatar, Bahrain are far more transparent markets than they once were. I think the public sector, the states, the governments have recognized the long-term economic and societal benefits in opening up the markets. So that's the first thing. I want to set that straight. International operators can definitely come here, and of course Knight Frank are fully aware of viable opportunities. Second to that is the economics, which is partly driven by the supply and demand imbalance. If you look at the big data center operators here in Dubai, let's take Kazna, GDH, Pure and Equinix, Pure over in Abu Dhabi, most of these guys are at full capacity. And when you look at the end user's long-term demand profile, there's clearly a significant imbalance. In addition, when you look at other tier one global markets, whether that be Frankfurt, London, Amsterdam, Paris, parts of India, Tokyo, Singapore, etc., the end users also require operational diversity. So at the moment, they don't have that operational diversity, hence the opportunity for others to come in. In addition, and it's probably worth stating that, again, on the economics, the rents that the hyperscalers are willing to pay in this market reflects at least a 30 to 40% premium on other tier one markets. And yet, the construction cost associated to developing data centers is relatively similar. Therefore, the IRRs and the returns and the profits are a little bit more attractive.
So, would you say that is the USP of the Middle East market vis-a-vis Europe and East Asia?
Yeah, I think the other consideration here in terms of looking out or kind of forecasting is looking at growth sector verticals. You cannot go to any data center conference these days without talking about AI. It used to be talking about sustainability, and that in itself is a very interesting subject matter, sustainable AI. And I'm sure we'll probably come on to that in a moment. But what I would say, and this is looking at it from a global perspective, where have we seen AI deployed to date? We are seeing 500, 1 gigawatt single deployments in the US. We have now seen the first AI deployment in the UK. And we believe we have seen the first AI deals struck between operator and end user here in Dubai. If you look at it from a government public sector perspective as well, the UAE and Saudi Arabia in particular are unique in that those public sectors are really promoting the development of AI. So they're calling for more development within this sector vertical. Why? Probably because they're trying to pivot away from an over-reliance on oil and tourism, which makes total sense. Whereas, look at the moratoriums that are being enacted in Singapore,
yes,
in Amsterdam, in Ireland now. It's becoming increasingly challenging getting data center permits and power. And that makes it very hard for the hyperscalers and the end users to commit to deployments where they don't see that same positive public sector support. So at the moment, that's where there's a real opportunity for this region particularly to leverage that positive sentiment.
They used to say that Dubai is the Manhattan of the Middle East, but given the data sector developments here, would you say it's all set now to become the Northern Virginia of the Middle East?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question. And I think it's going to be a close call between parts of Abu Dhabi in Kazad and Mafraq and ICAD. and a battle between those guys and the likes of DSO, Dubai Silicon Oasis, and Jebel Ali and Business Bay, and now Ajman, of course, with Kasna's recent announcement. So do I think in the course of the next 5 years we're going to start seeing the creation and saturation of 100 megawatt plus data centers? 100%. I have absolutely no doubt that by 2029 there will be at least 200, 300, 400 megawatt IT data centers. That in itself, will be a very unique offering in comparison to most other major markets. Not quite North Virginia, but certainly catching up.
Okay, let's go back to AI for a bit. What's your vision for the growth of AI in the Middle East? What kind of infrastructure is required? Are we building it right? Are we building it in the right places? What are we building? Where are we building it?
Again, fantastic question. And as I said on my panel today, I think on average over the course of the last 6 months, myself and my global team probably received between 10 to 20 emails per day.
Wow.
From prospective landowners that now feel that they own the next AI-ready data center development site. And of course, we asked why. And they say, well, I have a site which is located next to a power station or a very large substation. And we say, where is it? And it usually is typically in the middle of nowhere, right? And the reason why they believe that it's sat on an AI gold mine is that they've heard connotations around the idea that AI data centers aren't latency centric, that they don't need the same type of connectivity as traditional cloud infrastructure. Now, as our good friend Anil from Microsoft said today, he said, look, that isn't absolutely true. It all comes down to the type of compute that is being utilized and provided via the GPUs. So, is it training AI? Is it inference AI? Is this for gaming? Is it for VR? Is it AR? It's understanding the type of compute that's sat there. What I would say is that the AI facilities themselves have one unique component, and that is the need for significant amounts of power. To put it into perspective, in terms of the engagement we're having with data center operators and the developers of such, we believe on a global basis, the minimum IT power required to develop a viable tier 1 cloud facility is 50 megawatts IT capacity, minimum. For AI, the operators and investors behind those platforms won't touch anything less than 200 megawatts of IT capacity, so a 4x. Now, getting that type of power is very, very challenging in certain parts of the world. Getting that type of power here in the Middle East, actually, at those current levels, isn't that challenging.
But these are not renewable sources. The kind of power available here is from traditional sources.
Correct. And I think that really is, the opportunity in front of us. And that's probably the final piece of the jigsaw that is needed to supercharge this region as being and becoming a genuine AI global hub. Now, of course, people don't realize, but we already have a nuclear plant in Dubai. We already have it, it's there. Is it being utilized for data centers? No one knows, because we don't have a direct PPA coming off the nuclear plant to a data center. It's going into the general mix of transmission. Another component that people don't realize, that the projections for 2030 is that nearly 90% of the UAE's power will be provided via solar. We've got the world's largest solar park, Al Maktoum. So I personally believe that the limitations around implementing nuclear power in tier 1 markets where land is constrained and you're very close to populations and populace, like London, can't put nuclear plants in London, can't put nuclear plants in Tokyo or Singapore or parts of Sydney. Here in the Middle East, we have huge deserts with very limited populations curtailing those. So we have an opportunity to publicly fund, because we're very fortunate that the governments here have deep pockets, and I really think that's something that those, particularly the Emiratis and particularly the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, can invest heavily into, concurrent with their investments directly into AI. That would be the big game changer.
There's this renewed interest in nuclear energy across the world. Microsoft and AWS are also talking about it. They're planning on reopening the 3 Mile Island plant as well.
Yep.
So, given that interest, do you think there will be, say, in 10 years, what kind of percentage do you see nuclear power contributing to data centers?
Oh, now we are crystal ball gazing.
Okay, 5 years then.
Well, for 5 years, a lot less than 10 years, I can tell you that. But no, I think in reality, ultimately, the cloud data centers themselves are becoming increasingly larger in scale. So you can no longer take a medium voltage supply these days in any market.
True.
You have to go via HV into transmission. That in itself has issues as well, because most of these transmission substations and networks are publicly funded, and it takes a while for these governments to draw down those funds to create additional grid supply points. And that used to be there used to be a big argument as to why nuclear won't come forward, because one, it was extremely expensive to develop, and two, it would take between 7 to 9 years to implement. Well, that's the point now, is that to go and get new transmission grid power in a variety of markets, whether that's the UK, Germany, Paris, parts of Spain in particular, it'll take 7 years to get a new HV connection, and it could cost 100 million euros to develop a new grid supply point. Well, why would we not then go with nuclear power, which is recyclable, by the way, it's not renewable. It takes 7 years, it has less of a land grab, it's far more efficient, there's been significant technological advancement to make it much safer. So if you were to ask me now, in 10 years' time, and if we were talking about the Middle East specifically, which we are, I would say that driving off Saudi and Dubai specifically as a makeup of the totality, I would say nearly 15 to 20% of the power will be nuclear in 10 years' time.
Wow, that's ambitious.
Do you think I've overshot it?
No, it sounds ambitious, and I like ambitious plans. It's only when you think big, when you aim big, right?
Indeed.
Okay, you were also talking about the skills gap, especially the quality of the teams that are managing the technical teams. Could you delve a bit more into that? How do you propose we bridge the skills gap here in the Middle East?
No, so it's a good point, and I think you infer an interesting angle that I think there is a common misconception, and I see this a lot from international operators and investors that are considering moving into this market. There's an assumption that the labor cost is significantly less, which is true. It is a lot less to employ a construction team, an engineering-based team, etc. But unfortunately, the output is less than it would be at parts of more mature markets. So whilst it might cost me 50% less per head in terms of construction, actually the output is 50% less too, so I've got to double up. So actually one negates the other. On that, I think we need to have much more upskilling in terms of bringing the labour pool, if you like, into more mature markets to see globally acceptable standards, not just in terms of health and safety, but in terms of seeing something from a life cycle. That's really, really important, number one. Number two, in relation to management teams, it's fantastically positive that we're seeing the creation of, every month it feels like there's a new data center operator that's being announced. But when you look at the management teams, and obviously I'm not going to specify which, sometimes you have to question the longevity of that platform based on the management's exposure to global hyperscale customers, the management's exposure to international institutional investors, and how they go about appraising developments and overall business plans. And I think at the moment the management teams are too structured in their verticals. You either have a guy that just does real estate, a guy that just does sales, a guy that just does engineering.
They need cross-functional.
We need to have cross-functionality. There was an investor who's asking me about the formation of a new management team and what did I think was the most important role to fulfill, and we don't see many of these types of individuals, but I think the most valuable role today is a pre-sales engineer, and by that I mean somebody who can talk the talk with Microsoft's or Oracle's technical team, but also understands that every point he makes will have an impact on the margin and the investors behind him.
Wonderful. this isn't your first time at Dubai CDC.
No, it's not.
I was wondering if you could share your experience. You moderated a panel earlier in the day today. So what's been your experience like at Dubai CDC?
Well, first and foremost, it was my first time last year, and the fact that I'm back this year shows you that I enjoyed last year anyway. Not least because of the food offering was superb. But that's not the only reason. No, I think again it's an illustration of the growth within our sector, particularly in this region. I think last year there definitely weren't as many as attendees as there were this year.
Yes.
You nearly had a full house.
We had twice as many this year.
Yeah, fantastic to see that. And I think also what was really interesting this year round was the nature of the attendees. There are a number of conferences that you go to which are very weighted towards a particular segment of the sector. Here, just the questions that I got on the back of the panel presentation were really interesting, a really eclectic mix. Talking about some of the technical components of connectivity, some of the economic considerations. So that's what I would say for me is the reason as to why I'll be coming back next year is the eclectic mix of attendees and the very kind questions that you've asked me. You haven't really grilled me, Deborah, so I'm very, very grateful.
Well, next year we promise to be bigger and better. In fact, we're going to bring in elements of connectivity and several other interconnected industries. It's going to be Interconnect World Dubai next year.
Marvellous.
And we look forward to welcoming you. Always a pleasure to interview you.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, thank you.